It's a mid-season break and Lakeside Drive still exists without he who shall not be named, but with IndyCar content. It's the halfway point of the Formula One season. Max Verstappen has won the championship 472 times so far, and Red Bull dominance is sure to be had for at least the next couple of years until 2026. Now, we are here to discuss who is in the bin and who's not in the bin, because that's the kind of conversation that we have here on Lakeside Drive, the Australian opinion on Formula One. Joined by my friend and yours, Thomas J. Campy. G'day, mate.
G'day, mate. How are you? Hello, listener.
I'm good. Welcome back, viewer. We've got a video for this podcast for the first time in a long time. My sincerest apologies that hasn't happened for a while. We're back in the camp household on the camp couch.
Yeah.
And I have realised that there's now quite a lot of gear between you and I where we're sitting, so it's hard to see, but it looks better framed-wise for the camera. If you're not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go and do that. More video content, of course, will be on the way. Some very exciting things happening for the podcast, for us personally.
Yep.
Some things that I'll hopefully be able to share in a couple of months, weeks' time. It is around the Australian Grand Prix. It's very exciting.
Great result.
Fantastic result. But, and also, I don't know if I should shout out another podcast, but why not? I'm editing it and they're paying me to do so. If you want to listen to any of the race this week, your boy is editing that too. So things are going well in that space.
Well done, Jim. Well done. And we can't not talk about it. We're car people. We love cars. I've got some work done to my front-wheel drive Hilux, actually. And listener, I can assure you it's at least 6 inches higher than what it was this time last week. So completely legal and compliant as well. If an officer of the law pulls me over, I was,
asking for an autograph.
But I can assure you that my car is looking very good and it's been absolutely enjoyable.
I won't quote you specifically when we caught up for dinner last week, but you did tell me that it had some plastic surgery done.
Did. So I call the
here we go.
Got some new tyres and rims, so I call that the boob job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's had a boob job, and I got some high heels as well. So I got a 3.5-inch lift, which is just exciting. So I didn't go 35s. I just put 33s on it, but I assure you it looks great. So
it looks specifically great because of that F3 wing that we managed to steal from the Grand Prix.
And I can tell you it's done wonders for the fuel economy. So I've gone from about 7.9 litres per 100 to about 11. But you know what? That's okay because I look good when I drive now. So that's all I care about.
Listener, if I ever get an opportunity to film Campy driving whilst he's driving, looking good is probably not the thing that comes to my mind, if I'm perfectly honest. Hey, a massive thank you to Freya, who has been helping us out, all of us, in the mid-season break of Formula One, to go and explore some other motorsport. She went to Nashville, to IndyCar, and spoke with some fantastic people.
Yeah.
Please go back and listen to that. I know that IndyCar is not everyone's cup of tea, but in terms of how to watch the sport, how the sport works, some interviews with some local hero drivers in Will Power and Scotty McLaughlin. It's just really, really great content. So go do yourself a favour. Go back and listen to that podcast. Yeah. But Campy, we are here to talk about the mid-season break.
We are.
Max Verstappen is absolutely on a run, and that's great for him. You've said plenty of times, especially recently, that you're not bored of Max Verstappen domination.
Not yet.
And I think it's more going to be now, how dominant can Red Bull be compared to other dominant periods of Formula One history, thinking about Ferrari, thinking about Mercedes, and just how big of a gap is there going to be between Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez at the end of the year before Daniel Ricciardo slots himself back into it?
Oh, I think it's inevitable that Danny Rick takes that seat back. I mean, Horner came out this week and already said he's already met all the expectations and done everything that we've wanted Daniel to achieve and more. So I think the narrative is changing behind closed doors. I think they have a clear perspective of what they want to do going forward, and they want Daniel back because Max wants him there, and they think that Daniel will push Max in a way that will keep him invigorated to come and do what he does every weekend too. So I think Danny Rick will perform, particularly on past performances. He'll be fine. It's exciting to have him back, so that's good. Albeit 2 races, it doesn't really feel like he ever left.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think what is really interesting is similar period to last year, of course, we had Seb Vettel leaving the sport altogether, Alonso jumping from Alpine to Aston Martin, Alpine announcing Oscar Piastri unannouncing himself,
Disaster.
and DR leaving, which was really hard to cope with. I think we then the Formula One world spent the next little while trying to figure out where Daniel Ricciardo was going to go. It seems to be going pretty well so far for him. What we'll do at some point in this episode is put everyone in or out of the bin, because I needed to be original. I didn't want to do a report card like the race had done, winners and losers. I did the WTF1 podcast. I stole your Ferrari point. To which the boys thought that was controversial.
Really? Hell. Don't listen to us then. Jeez.
I did say that. I was like, if you listen to our podcast, it's not me saying it, and the opinions are way out there. But I think what's interesting is there are things happening. Okay, let's cover off on a couple of things that are happening in the world of Formula One before we put teams in or out of the bin.
Yep.
There are some rumors around silly season things occurring. Okay, let's start with probably the thing that will sort of be the key to all of these things occurring. The first is Carlos Sainz and his apparent signing a pre-deal with Audi. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that makes a lot of sense for a number of reasons. Firstly, he's not Ferrari's preferred driver anymore. Secondly, he's not winning a world championship with Ferrari anytime soon.
Nope.
Thirdly, Audi is who his dad races for in Dakar. And fourthly, it'll allow him, I think, to potentially get himself into a space that is maybe not so favoured towards one driver. Now, of course, that depends on who is in the other seat of the Audi team. I think Valtteri Bottas should absolutely be there, and there'll be an interesting dynamic between those two drivers. But if that was to occur, one of the things that I think is really interesting at the moment, Campy, is we've also heard then a pre-deal with Norris going to Ferrari. Yep. I've also heard Albon to Ferrari, Charles Leclerc to have signed a pretty significant deal to stay with Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton hasn't yet signed a contract.
He will.
Hugo Boss is apparently coming in to take over AlphaTauri as the brand for that.
Yeah.
And AlphaTauri as a car will be the Red Bull from this year, next year, which is unusual why they haven't already done that, like they've done in previous times. But there is some things to sort of flesh out there, I think, one of which being this big Ferrari thing.
Ferrari is interesting. It's interesting for me that they re-signed Leclerc, which he's signed a contract extension. Is that right? For another 2 years. So
actually talking to the microphone, but yes.
Yes, sorry. So that's thrown me a bit because I didn't think. Just looking at the history of Ferrari, I didn't think that they would do that. I thought at some stage I'd start blaming, particularly Leclerc, because he's the number one driver and this is his 4th season with the team, and getting more of an opportunity at Ferrari than 4 years is rare. So that says to me, with particularly Vasseur come in, he's marked he's put all his pennies in Charles Leclerc's bag and said this guy's the guy to win us the world championship. I still don't think they will in the next 4 years. I think Red Bull's way too good. But interesting from Ferrari. Carlos is definitely on the nose, although I think he's performed pretty well this year. I mean, Leclerc's had some shocking results and some shocking races too. So, but he's on the outer. For me, Carlos is one. I love Carlos, and he's one of my favourite drivers. But he's always been that guy that's never quite been the number one. If you look where he started, his teams like with Verstappen, and then he went across to Renault, and then he was at McLaren for a year, and then he went on to Ferrari, and he's always chopped and changed. He's never really had what I would call a secure long-term deal. Unfortunately, the one he's had with Ferrari for the last, this is in his 3rd season now, he just hasn't been the number one driver, which has been a shame. I really wanted him to, but he just hasn't been, and Ferrari's made their bed now. Interesting that Ferrari's trying to get Lando. I think it's a bad move for Lando. I really do. I mean, McLaren seemingly have got their stuff together and they're back on the podium. if they continue that for the rest of the year. If you were Lando, why on earth would you move to Ferrari, which is, they've won one championship since in the last, 20, since when was the last one they won with Raikkonen? So that was 07. So we're not talking about great history. And with the way this sport is going, when you design a new car and you change, you'll dominate for 4 or 5 years. I think that's what we're in at the moment, and I can't see it changing. Things will change eventually, but not a great move for Norris. But hey, good on him. He's got to do what he's got to do.
It's interesting. Many, many drivers have said that you don't really turn down Ferrari. I think the only person I know of who said it recently on a podcast you're enjoying at the moment is DC.
Yep.
Because he didn't want to be a number 2 on paper or a number 2. Of course, he just ended up being a number 2, not on paper, but that was fine for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Ferrari aren't the team they once were.
No, but also other teams are more of a team than they used to be.
Yep.
In the same thought process, which was probably a really bad way of putting it. But I think you're right. And look, just to steal a point, never thought I'd ever say this from a WTF1 podcast, but I was on it. Callan O'Keefe, who co-hosts with Harry Benjamin, was saying, when do we stop saying, well, Ferrari should be winning a world championship and Mercedes should be winning a world championship? They're not, as you say, the team they used to be. So why does everyone just expect them to be as good as they, historically have been, only with drivers like Michael Schumacher?
Well, because of the face of Formula One. They make, without Formula One and Ferrari and Formula One go hand in hand together. And they have historically. And that's why Ferrari have veto power. And all the heads of F1 have always been previous, Ferrari team principals. So the reality is Ferrari and F1 go hand in hand, which I think is good, but which the history of the sport suggests that. Moving forward, I'm not sure it looks like that because, Mercedes and Red Bull, when they've had 25, 30 years in the sport, their results are going to be 1,000 times better than what Ferraris have been, which they are and have been for a long time. So, yeah, things will change and things are in place for a reason, but it will change eventually. So,
all right, let's talk about who is and isn't in the bin. This is going through all of the teams, team by team. We're going to start at the very back of the pack, and we're going to work our way towards the front. Let's start with AlphaTauri, a new driver lineup going into the mid-season break of course, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. The team as a whole, where are you putting them?
Not in the bin.
Not in the bin?
No.
Even though they're plumb last in standings?
Well, they've got a dog crap car, but Yuki's performed consistently throughout the whole start of the year, and Danny Rick's back there, so how can you put that team in the bin?
That's a very good point. This is why this is the thing that matters, not scorecards or winners and losers.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And the first 2 races back, in all 3 races, they've been in genuine chance of points. So, hey, that's great.
It's a team that obviously was so far behind and off the pace for such a long time in this season that it was just unacceptable, really.
Yep.
Especially considering what Pierre Gasly was able to do with the car pre this whole new change of regulations. What I think is good or promising to see is Daniel coming into Hungary, being able to outperform Yuki, but with Yuki not having all of the upgrades because he buggered his front wing.
Yep.
So, and for them to be fighting in the mid-pack.
Yep.
I think that was really important. Coming out of the summer break, now going to tracks like the Netherlands, which will be interesting, and Monza, Singapore, Japan. Then we go to the Americas and then finishing up in the Middle East. There is a good selection of different tracks in there for, I think, not only Red Bull to see what Daniel is still capable of, but for also to see what Daniel can help the team with to develop the car for the rest of the season.
Yep. Because
considering as far back as they are on championship points at the moment with three whole championship points, won all by Yuki Tsunoda at this point.
Yep.
And trailing Alfa Romeo Sauber with 9 points in ninth. There is a potential for a turnaround here because in looking at where this lands, really, Williams 7th, Haas 8th, Alfa Romeo 9th, AlphaTauri 10th, talking 11 points, 9 points, 3 points. This isn't looking at the front of Red Bull 503 points, Mercedes 247.
Yeah.
So the back of the pack there, I think, is going to be a really interesting place to watch because a lot of upgrades will have to be brought.
Yep.
A lot of focus being put in. of course, to the remainder of the season, and then just to see how they can perform on tracks that are bloody brilliant to watch.
I think both drivers will get points for the rest of the year fairly consistently. There'll be scraps and they'll need things to happen in the race. Like we'll need a couple of the better cars on the grid to fall away, and DNF in order to get those positions. Because if the top 4 teams finish where they should every week, then you're scrapping for 1 and 2 points. And they're not a better car than teams like Alpine or Ferrari when they're the 5th best on the day. So the reality is they need some luck to get them, but I think they'll get points consistently through the rest of the year. So exciting for me. And they're going to be called Hugo Boss next year. Is that confirmed?
Well, no, that's not confirmed. There's a speculation at this point, but there are rumours around that being the case. Of course, Red Bull, the owner, the owner, co-founder, who knows, Dietrich Messages is no longer. So now it was his big push to have AlphaTauri as a thing. Be interesting to see now what happens. Of course, F1's uniforms are AlphaTauri, so maybe there'll be a bit of a change.
I thought Lawrence Stroll owned Hugo Boss at one stage and turned it around. Anyway, interesting for me that another brand, a global brand, is going to go in and try and do what Red Bull did. We're not an energy drink company. We're a racing team.
Yeah.
That makes, is Hugo Boss the brand to do that? I'm not sure. But Hugo Boss has been in the sport for a long time.
What's your personal fashion brand of choice, Campy? What is your beanie? What brand is that?
I've got
Rip Curl.
No, this one's a Hurley one, I think.
Hurley.
I've actually got a couple of Hugo Boss suits, believe it. Yeah. I don't wear suit pants very often, but I've got the jackets. So
exclusively go out in only jackets.
Yeah.
No pants.
Not Euro style one that's a bit out there. They're just your standard liberal blues. A few blacks. So
Hurley and Hugo Boss.
Yeah.
Brands that begin with H.
Yeah, but Hugo Boss has been in the sport a long time too.
Yes.
Going back to the silver McLaren is the first time I remember with Lewis Hamilton behind that wheel in, circa 07, 08, 09, that era. So they've been around for a while.
Good reaching back into the memory of Hugo Boston.
Yeah.
Alfa Romeo, they're 9th in the championship, 9 points.
Yeah.
In or out of the bin?
I'm putting them in the bin because after the chat with Valtteri and the conversation that was had beforehand, they were genuinely expecting to be top 6 in Melbourne. That's where they thought they would be, which tells me that the car is nowhere near as good as they think it should be. So I'm going to put the team in the bin because I think they're over-expecting too much. In saying that, Valtteri's had a frustrating year because I want him to do better, but he's had some good points finishes. And Guan Yu Zhou at times has outperformed Valtteri, for whole weekends at a time. And I don't know what the points looks like for the two drivers, but I'm putting him in the bin because I think they expect too much of themselves.
Valtteri's on 5, Zhou's on 4.
There you go. So pretty even. I think Valtteri's always he's had the better year, but there's been times where Zhou's performed pretty well. So I'm not putting either of the drivers in the bin, but I'll put the team in there.
Well, we're only talking about the teams, so
right.
can remain in the bin.
Good.
Haas F1, 11 points. They're in 8th. Nico Hulkenberg, fantastic qualifying.
Yep.
The car can't seem to perform very well during the race and look after its tyres, so it always ends up falling towards the back.
Yep.
In terms of split for points, K-Mag has had 2 and Nico's had 9. So, for really, and we say this often, don't we, that realistically you've got, Red Bull should be 1 and 2, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Ferrari, and now McLaren kind of making up the rest of those places.
Yep.
That's 10 places already. So one of those cars has to have a bad time in those teams. So realistically, you're looking probably best for a lot of these teams to be finishing anywhere between 9th to 12th.
Yeah.
Should be happy with, considering the competition.
Yeah, well, so bins. Tough. It's a tough one.
This is why you get paid the big bucks to make these decisions, though.
Yeah, I know, and it's my bin, so.
You're the Chief Resource Management Officer of Lakeside Drive.
No, I'm not, because they've got a car that on Saturday performs well, which has got them the points this year, and that's the only reason they got points. The race pace is disastrous and rubbish, but with Nico Hulkenberg behind that wheel on a Saturday, they're getting the performances out of them that they need. interesting for me is that I think it's a B grade Ferrari or probably a C grade Ferrari, that car. When Ferrari performs well, Haas will be good. But when they don't and they're really off the pace, Haas way down. They've got some serious problems with that Ferrari engine into the integration of the chassis, which is causing all their tyre issues at the moment. And I think it's very interesting that we had tyre construction changes this year after Ferrari had been so bad. Do you think about it?
You didn't want us to put our tinfoil beanies on first.
Hey, I'm going with it. RFK is going to be president maybe next year, and he's the biggest tinfoil beanie of them all. So, that was a joke, by the way.
Okay,
See if I'd vote Democrat. I'm from Texas.
Inside your mind.
Think about it. Think about how bad Ferrari's been this year on their tyres, and it's been from day one.
Yes.
Why is it that mid-season that Pirelli decide, we're going to change the construction of the tyres because we think we need to change them because it's safer? Give me a break. It's affected Aston Martin, who are on the podium. It's clearly affected Red Bull over the one-lap pace. They don't have the same pace that they have since they've changed it. And Ferrari thinks they've got the best deal out of it. So, look, Ferrari's making some moves behind closed doors, I believe.
Let's talk about Williams now. They're 7th with 11 points, so the same number of points as Haas. It won't surprise you to know that all of those points are Alex Albon's.
Yeah, geez, he's had a cracking year, hasn't he? He's just getting better and better and better.
But the team is getting better and better and better. Seventh for Williams. Sixth is Alpine. Oh, I've just done a U. Alpine on 57 points, which is seemingly out of reach for these teams. So Williams really the best of
the rest.
The lower pack. You know, the mid pack being really McLaren and Alpine kind of fight. Well, to be honest, no, the mid pack is Alpine by itself.
Yeah.
And the front is the front five, and then everyone else.
Look at where that team's come since Claire Williams left. And I'm not saying Claire did a bad job. I've been
you had a really beautiful farewell to her.
Yeah, look,
it's the nicest thing you'd ever said recorded.
Yeah, probably. No, I like Claire, and I like the way that team. She turned it around. They obviously made a colossal mistake at one stage when Frank stepped away and Claire came in, and then they appointed the ex-Williams guy. I'm looking at his face. Can't remember his name.
Jos Capito?
No. The ex-Mercedes engineer who was originally at Williams and went to Mercedes, and they got him back. Paddy Lowe. And that was a colossal mistake for the organisation. And that ultimately put them to the ground because they had issues everywhere, and Paddy should have been on top of it and better. Claire got that team to a place where it was sellable. It had a lot of potential. All it needed was big investment. Big investment came, and look where the team is now. And they are on the up. It's slow, but they're not the team they were 5 or 6 years ago, which struggled to be on within 3 laps of the leaders at the end of the race. So excellent for me, and hey, I'm just loving Albon doing well this year.
Firmly out of the bin for Williams. Let's talk about Alpine, which I'm placing in the bin.
Yep.
In preparation for you doing it, I've prepped the bin. I've coloured it in their colours. They're on 57 points. They're in 6th at the moment. The next closest is McLaren on 5th on 103 points.
Yep.
Pretty disastrous set of circumstances they find themselves in without a team principal, without really a lot of their C-suite.
Yep.
Now after Belgium.
3 years ago, look at where this team was.
Bring back Cyril.
After the mid-season break, they went on a purple patch where they got results consistently. The second half of the last year, they just about beat McLaren in the Constructors Championships. Danny Rick, I think, got 3 podiums in the second half of the second year he was there. But he was performing and he was on it all the time. Look where they were. That is 3 years of bad management since Cyril's gone now. I mean, they've gone through Cyril, Otmar, all the technical staff, lost Piastri, Alonso, Danny Rick, which I understand why. Now they've got 2 French drivers, gave Ocon a long-term contract. I understand Gasly's a very attractive driver, but him and Ocon aren't, I don't think one is better than the other. They are pretty well-placed, equal drivers. So That team is a shambles.
Did you read Cyril's pretty scathing attack of the team from WRC, from his Fortress and Hyundai WRC, saying that the problem with the team is that there is no clear lead driver anymore? You've got two drivers who are at the same part of their career, who have got similarly matched skills, but there's no lead driver for the team to build around. And so without leadership, they're just a mess.
Yeah, and we've heard things about the team behind closed doors as well. I think it's public as well that, they didn't have a winning mentality. They weren't there yet. And I can understand that, being a team that's, hasn't had success in Formula One since Flavio in 05-06 with Fernando Alonso. So they're trying to rebring that. But, the lead driver, I don't think it really matters. I just think there's clearly a massive gap between the people running the organisation and then people at Renault, the head as well. Why not? When management gets those things wrong, I think it's creates a hell of a lot of dramas.
We're going to take an ad break. We'll be back in just a moment. A massive thank you to NordVPN for sponsoring this episode of Lakeside Drive. And Campy, of course, we know NordVPN is great. We actually already use it, and that's the reason that we partner with them for episodes like this.
I can assure you I'm not tech savvy at all, but
that's not surprising to anyone who listens.
If I can use a NordVPN, you can use it too. It's the greatest and most simple product ever. And the protection, jeez.
In terms of how to protect yourself online, as you say, it's really, really easy to use. Freya uses it when she's overseas. I use it when I'm overseas, but we all use it when we're sitting at home. We want to watch content that is region locked. You're a big fan, as we know, of any kind of housewife program.
Yes.
Of Kentucky or
connoisseur, mate, connoisseur.
Gold Coast, the Real Housewives, of course. Anything else you enjoy watching while you're doing that?
Yeah, look, in that genre, I'm just not up with them.
The Channel 4 coverage would be really good. If we could get the Channel 4 Formula 1 coverage here in Australia, because I can tell you that is the best F1 coverage I've seen. When I watched it for the British Grand Prix, live features were fantastic. Now, NordVPN are celebrating a holiday special, holidays for the US. Not probably quite yet here in Australia, but we're pretty close. I know some parents who are either very excited or not excited for that. Totally up to you. But if you go to nordvpn.com/Lakeside Drive, you can get an exceptionally special deal for Lakeside Drive listeners. Go to nordvpn.com/Lakeside Drive and you get a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not fully happy with it, you can get your money back, which is always a good thing, Campy.
It is.
All right, let's keep going with who's in the bin, who's out of the bin. You won't get your money back for this podcast if you listen this far. You have to have money to begin with. Let's talk about McLaren. Are they in or out of the bin, Campy? They're in 5th at the moment. Hilariously enough, really, for me. And 103 points, with the majority of those points being scored at the tail half of the first part of the season.
The real question is I've gone blank, Jim. What am I going blank about?
I don't know. We're talking about McLaren. Shall I start rattling off some names? Andrea Stella, Zach Brown, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri.
Let's just start that again.
No, this is great content.
Fuck's sake.
Come on, brain.
Zach Brown. Is Zach Brown in the bin or not? That's the real question.
I'm not sure he ever left. Did he for you?
Nah, he's still in there for me. But McLaren as a team are not in the bin because they've clearly figured out what was wrong with their car and gone and done what they needed to do. And we knew about this for once in our life. I thought the PR team was out enforcing McLaren, doing a real good job. They predicted it from the start of the year. And then when those changes came, immediate impact and got the results they should have been getting. So the team's out of the bin. Just not sure I can let Zach Brown off the hook for the Daniel Ricciardo treatment. I don't think he'll ever get out. I think he's a bit like Gasly.
Do you know?
I do like him, but he's just nah.
Do you know what's very interesting? Just talk about IndyCar for a moment because it's an episode I've just reviewed. Alex Palau, do you remember that whole thing last year?
Well, that's Fernando Alonso-esque timing, isn't it?
Well, he's not signing with McLaren. He's told Zach that he's not signing with them, and I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe he's going to stay with Chip Ganassi Racing, but all of that. Do you remember all the thing? Oh, Alex Palau is going to come and take Daniel Ricciardo's seat, blah, all that kind of stuff. And
come on,
McLaren having a real bad time in IndyCar with contracts again.
What's Palau supposed to do? He's got, I would move on because the McLaren in Indy's not a great car. But if he was signing with McLaren so that he could get a chance to get in an F1 car or potentially a race seat, look at what they got. They got Lando Norris and Piastri, who's, mate, there's no chance he's getting in that car anytime soon. So he's looking at it going, right, I'm in Indy. I'm going to concentrate on Indy. It's a great race. It's a great racing formula in the sense that anyone can get results at any time. Unlike Formula One, you've got to be in one of three teams. He's going, right, I'm doubling down. Let's get in a fast Indy car and have a crack at a championship.
There are rumours about him talking with Formula One teams, but there's only two teams that he can be talking to, and they're really AlphaTauri and Williams, none of whom have any relation to McLaren. So either way, there's nothing really lost for him, I don't think. And Chip Ganassi Racing do have a very, very fast car in Indy. So
this is the thing with Formula One. Think about someone like James Courtney, V8 Supercars. When he was in Europe doing the junior Formula categories, he was dominating people like Fernando Alonso's in that era in the juniors. Made them look second rate. Hecky Kovalainen, all guys that went on to get top drives. Now, for James Courtney, he said in the podcast, you know what? I'm glad I never went to F1 in hindsight because I would have been on the back of the grid and I would have been driving around for 18th and 19th position. I would have been in a car that couldn't do what I wanted to do, knowing that I was better than those guys in junior formulas when we had roughly the same machinery. To go to a sport like V8 Supercars and have a career where it is very rewarding, but he got to race in a category that he wanted to race in. Hey, that's what you want as a driver. At some level, in F1, you give up that knowing that there may be a carrot dangling that one day you'll get into that top drive.
At least people watch Formula One, unlike V8 Supercars.
Let's not, yes, these Gen 3 cars haven't been very good, have they?
That is the understatement of the year. Let's keep talking about teams. Yeah. So the team of McLaren is out of the bin, and I agree. I think completely. Oscar Piastri really having a great time. I enjoy rather seeing his personality being able to come out now. I think people have stopped comparing him to Daniel Ricciardo, which was an incorrect comparison.
Yeah, totally.
So it's good news, and the team have the heritage to push it down that path. Yep. So I think it's good all around. Let's talk about Ferrari. They're in fourth. They're on 191 points. They're 5 points behind Aston Martin, who are in third.
So they'll get third by the end of the year.
Yep. In or out of the bin?
Out.
Out of the bin.
Well, if you're going to be third at the end of the year, they can't really be in the bin,
Absolutely can they? They can. This isn't based on any kind of formula of points and cents.
No. It's like the thing we did at the start of the year, the rating system that we had. The parameters changed. Yeah, the parameters. I couldn't tell you what we predicted. If I tried to do the same, it'd be completely different. But yeah, Ferrari. Look, but they could be in the bin. All right, let's put them in the bin. Okay. I'll tell you why. Because we're still having strategy conversations about Ferrari in at least 8 of the 11 races that we've had thus far this season. So they're in the bin.
Okay. Aston Martin, third at the moment. Again, only 5 points ahead. A fantastic driver in Fernando Alonso. The other driver is Lance Stroll.
Yep.
And the upgrades that I've brought along haven't impacted the car in the way I think they probably would have wanted.
Yeah, well, as I said before, they've been massively affected by the entire construction and the effects it has on the car. So, look, great set first 7 or 8 races on the podium every race except for 1 or 2 and fighting for not wins, but they were definitely the second best car.
Monaco should have been a win. They should have made a better strategy call and pitted Fernando a lap early. Would have been ahead of Max. Would have been the only race this year Red Bull wouldn't have won, I reckon.
There you go. I don't think they ever had. They never had enough time up their sleeves to get in front of Max. Max would have if they pitted one. It didn't matter.
I think I worked out the sums, although my maths is not great, but I think I figured out that depending on Max's in lap and Fernando's out lap, but in clear air and Fernando on the right tyre, I think he would have been fine. But anyway, I'm
trying to remember what they put Fernando on the slick, but he needed to come back in and go onto the wet, or was it like the other way around? Yep. Yes. No, they would still never would have got in front of Max.
Well,
Red Bull made the right call.
Yeah.
And they went opposite of...
But don't forget, that Max stayed out an extra lap compared to everybody else. Fernando came in, put slicks on, not inters on, and if he put inters on, by the time Max would have come in and around again, he would have been behind. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
They did the right thing when they went opposite to Red Bull, though, so it's good. So they had to try something because they were behind. They were never going to pass on track.
Yes.
And it didn't work out for them. I still don't think they would have ever had track position on Max.
Okay, so Aston Martin, are in or out of the bin?
They're out of the bin.
Okay.
But they've got Stroll as driver, so that puts them in the bin too. So,
Mercedes. Now, Mercedes have had a really interesting time this year. Lewis has still not signed a contract. They brought upgrades, they had upgrades set for Imola. Of course, Imola didn't happen. Then Monaco, then finally Barcelona. They double podiumed in Barcelona. Mercedes were back, apparently. That's the last time we've really seen them strong, has to be said. For the rest of that part of the first half of the season, they've just not been anywhere near as strong as they should have been. It's taken them so long to accept that the no side pod thing was a mistake, and then to be able to work through putting the car together in a way that it should have been.
Yeah, they put side pods on and the car's automatically working somewhat of a resemblance of what the car used to be like. So, yeah, they're out of the bin. They're getting better. And I think it might be I think Red Bull are too far up the road for anyone to catch them in at least next year as well. So
they're over half the points ahead of under half the points of Red Bull.
Yeah. So Mercedes, they're not in the bin, but they've had an interesting year. But Lewis is starting to get a bit excited again about the sport. George.
Let's talk about George Russell. Where do you rate him at the moment?
What are we rating him on? His personality?
Whatever you would like to rate him on, Campy.
Let's keep it clean and on track. And
let's leave
his personality out of it because he's got the personality of a doorknob. Mm-hmm. He's boring as.
Allegedly.
Oh, mate, please. I'll tell him that to us. Fucking hell. I'm not on the grid. I'm never going to be on the grid. So
don't say never.
I can pot shot from here if I want.
Don't say never.
And yes,
I will laugh.
I would never say that to his face either.
Firstly, that PRs wouldn't let you anywhere near him. Secondly, if you ever did have an opportunity to torture on a drive, you go, can you sign this?
It's been said that you have the personality of a doorknob. What do you say to people that say those things? Whilst I go red in the face.
Hiding behind yourself.
Now, look, George, for me, he deserved that spot in Mercedes, and he's a good driver. He's a great driver. His battle with Hamilton last year didn't mean much for me. Although he got more points, I just don't think Lewis was invested in the year as he was. This year's been different. I don't think Lewis is invested in this championship as he previously has been. But he's getting better, and I think Lewis has been better than him this year. So I don't know how to judge them until Mercedes has got a world championship winning car and they're both going head to head. I mean, a hell of a driver to even compete with Lewis over a season. So, yeah, he's not as good as Lewis for me.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to talk about because the teammate is the biggest comparison.
Yeah.
The equal comparison. Valtteri Bottas on his day was faster than Lewis. The problem is consistency. Lewis has all the best luck in the world. We spoke about that very early on in this podcast.
Yep.
Valtteri did not, and that's fair enough. That just is what it is. So I think it's going to be an interesting, as you say, look, they're not going to be fighting for a championship, I don't think, anytime soon. Red Bull just have this absolute dominance with this set of regulations. Going to 2026 will also be interesting, but we're starting to hear now George push the team to get a preferred strategy to, are we racing each other? Can I get past? All that kind of I'm faster. All those kinds of conversations, which I'm actually here for, to be honest. I think that's great. It shouldn't, he's done his rookie year in Mercedes last year.
Yep.
Now he's here to challenge it. And I think it's also good for Lewis. In the same way, let's talk about Red Bull now. In the same way that Max needs a driver to push him, Lewis does as well.
Before we go there, I put George in a Mark Webber category. Is he good enough to win a world championship? Absolutely he is. Is he going to win one? I don't think so. If he does win it, everything has to go his way, and it's right time, right place. On his day, he's as good as the best drivers that have ever done it. Is he going to win multiple world championships? I don't think so. Does he win? Can he win one? He's got the talent to win one. But whether he does or not, that's where I put it. For George.
Red Bull, in or out of the bin?
It's out of the bin.
Oh yeah.
How can you, mate? Do they go undefeated this year? I think we can start having that conversation now. Do they go undefeated?
Absolutely. There is just no one anywhere close to them.
Yeah. Well, we've heard rumours about them trying to change qualifying. So no DRS in qualifying now, which is totally a rule to knock Red Bull back. But it'll also affect every other team on the grid as well. So, if you want to be that blatant about trying to peg back Red Bull, just make sure Red Bull can't use DRS in qualifying and everyone else can.
Max will still be faster.
Jeez.
But it's like, remember, Lewis, the Mercedes car of the Hamilton dominance era was fantastic out front. It was designed to be out front.
Yeah.
When it was behind somebody else, it really struggled.
Yeah.
We saw that with Lewis. We saw that with Valtteri. Same way, I think, for me, looking at where Max is, he obviously loves a bit of a challenge, and we saw him in Belgium have to get past some cars. But the way he got past Sergio was just, Sergio didn't even exist.
Yeah, but you look at the difference between Max and Sergio. It's when Sergio's been in those positions for the last 7 or 8 races. Yes. He has struggled to get past people, unlike Max. Yeah, they can definitely go undefeated for me.
Oh, easy.
I don't think it'll happen because, look, Formula 1's Formula 1. There's always a race where there's craziness. Think like Germany 2019. That was the most hectic race we've seen in a long time.
Best race.
Yeah, a lot of fun. So we're always going to get a race like that which throws up some results. But if we get your stock standard F1 possessions that happens 80% of the time, Red Bull go undefeated. It doesn't matter what they do to them in qualifying. They just Max behind that in that car is too good. And that is the most dominant car we've ever seen in Formula 1.
Well, that is who is and who isn't in the bin. Some surprises there for me. Let me know if there were some surprises there for you. You can do that by joining our Discord server and joining the conversation. We will be back next week with a preview of the Dutch Grand Prix as we just think about what can actually happen. It'd be interesting to see if anything craziness comes out in the next week, Campy, too.
Well, if that's the race Red Bull can lose, it'll be Max's home Grand Prix. Probably the most important one to him all year.
Just to add that in. If you want to support the show, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Now, the first is it doesn't cost you anything. You can leave us a rating or a review, and it helps enormously. I cannot tell you, if you have time to leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts with a written review or on Spotify, if you tap 5 stars as well in the podcast home page, that is just, it means a lot to us. We read all the reviews and we really, really love being able to reach so many people all across the world. That is really fantastic. The second way you can do that, if you do want to financially support the show, you can either join our Patreon as a patron of the show. You get exclusive access to our Discord server where the 3 of us, Freya, where Campy actually talks. If he ever logs into Discord, you get a direct line to us. We'll be able to do, we'll be doing very shortly as well, a hell of a lot more content. So I can promise you we're going to be ramping up things again, including video again. We'll hopefully be able to do some some Patreon special episodes as well. So make sure you do that. You can also buy some merchandise too, which is great. The hats will make a comeback at some point once I can figure out exactly what the supply issue is. That was a whole debacle. But that's it. So massive thank you for continuing to listen to the show, to support the show, to watch the show, wherever you are in the world. I hope you have a fantastic week. We will see you next week for a preview of the Dutch Grand Prix. Thanks, my man.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I will thank you.
Very kind of you.